Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Aida Garcia-Toledo, who is the non-toxic munchkin. Super excited to be chatting about the article that came out. Everybody's talking about it with, the kid or baby food and toxins in the baby food. And I had a lot of calls from parents and a lot of emails, people just really concerned about what they saw in there. So thanks so much for coming on to chat about this.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, the news last week was, I think, it had a lot of parents concerned, and understandably. Um, I will mention that the news from last week isn't new news, which kind of some people were really found it really interesting to hear. I've been doing non-toxic munchkin for over a decade now, and it was back in 2011 when I first covered this topic, which was heavy metals in baby food. And since then, it's come out into the news at least 8 times. So it's not new news that baby food does contain certain heavy metals or can contain heavy metals. What was new news last week, actually, though, was that because Congress has taken an interest and started looking into this, um, what came out is that a lot of these companies knew that that certain foods that they were selling had heavy metals, high levels, and they still sold the food. So that's kind of like, well, what's going on. But I think what's important to understand is, well, first of all, we could kind of talk about what are we talking about, right? What's the heavy metal and why is it in baby food, which is what everyone kind of wants to know, first of all. And what they found, what studies have found, is that many of the store-bought, well-known brands, both organic and non-organic, were found to contain high levels of arsenic and sometimes even lead. And the reason for this, there's a couple of reasons. On one hand, you have that a lot of the ingredients naturally, a lot of vegetables naturally, and some fruits contain heavy metals. These heavy metals can be found in the soil of certain fruits and vegetables. For example, root growing vegetables, you have sweet potatoes, beets, carrots. A lot of these ingredients that are very popular in baby foods tend to have levels of heavy metal. It's all going to depend on the soil, and the soil gets the heavy metal naturally, and sometimes it gets increased levels of heavy metal due to pollution. If it's growing near some sort of like industrial pollution. Sometimes the water that's used to irrigate the fields can be contributing to heavy metal, but that's one reason. The other reason is that you have some of these foods that you buy in stores contain preservatives, and they contain additives, and then sometimes those things also add to the total load of heavy metal. So the main issue is that these companies, first of all, they're not required by law, by our federal government, to test. So because they're not required to test for heavy metals, there's no legal requirements, many of them weren't really testing the final product. So some of these companies were testing independent, individual ingredients, maybe testing the carrots, and then they were testing the rice flour that they were adding to it, but they weren't testing the final product. Which obviously, when you're adding different ingredients, the total load of heavy metal can be a lot higher than the individual ingredients. And then the other issue is that some of them just weren't testing. So the conclusion is, yes, our government needs to start regulating baby foods. But in the meantime, what do we do as parents, right? What can we do? Can we trust store-bought foods? And if these heavy metals are found naturally in our soil, is it safe to make baby food at home? That's, another common question that we get. And, the answer is there are companies who are, they're testing them. They decide, they're going to pay for the testing, and they do test. And there's actually like a certification program. It's called like the Clean Label certification, Clean Label Project. And they certify companies who want to participate, and they certify them for a long list of chemicals, including heavy metals. And, these are brands that we all see in stores, like Once Upon a Farm is there, Yummy Spoonfuls is another one. There's like about 5 or 6 of them who do tests. So, that's one alternative. And you can still make your own, baby food at home, but the key is always to eat a balanced diet, because you want to avoid just only eating one ingredient that might be high in arsenic, for example. The other thing is that one that I thought was really interesting is that all these studies always find that rice products tend to have high levels of arsenic. And kids, like when you're thinking, well, what has rice products? Puffs that little kids like to eat has rice products. A lot of infant cereal is rice based, but even the baby food, like the actual veggies and all that, like a lot of times rice flour and rice sometimes are just added to it too. You have to really read the ingredients. So avoiding rice products is another thing that we can do to just decrease the total level of heavy metals in our baby foods.
Yeah. I, you really hit the nail on the head there with it not being new, but I still think it's pretty scary. And I guess, for us as warriors in the world of non-toxic living, to, whatever degree that we're working off that, it's not new to us. I mean, this is not surprising that there's chemicals in food. I always tell people, if it's in a package, if it's got a fun label, if it's sitting on a shelf for weeks and weeks, there's going to be preservatives and there's going to be chemicals. And one of those things will be metals. I mean, it's a little bit shocking how high the levels of some of these things were in these products. But again, there's really, very minimal testing. And I work with Rob Herring on a lot of projects, who's done soil. He did the documentary Need to Grow. And he talked about a lot of this stuff in there. And the soil is so devoid of nutrients right now because we're mass producing things. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist. If you're using the fields over and over and over again, then you're going to lose the chemicals. But also that with the machinery, there's going to be some chemicals that go back in to the soil, and there's runoff from plants and all of these things. So yeah, it's a very tough place to be for parents, because we also don't really know how dangerous these things are to whatever degree. I mean, we know that you probably don't want a lot of metal in your body, but a little bit is usually okay if it's very minimal amounts. Like we're made of these things as well. So, but then you talk about the whole lead, right? And then, a long time ago, we thought lead was okay. And then, a little bit is okay. And then we're like, oh, no, none is okay. So it's, maybe some of these things aren't really okay, or worse than we think. And then there's the whole other side of me as a pediatrician that's looking at the chronic disease rates in kids, and everything skyrocketing. And then you have to wonder, and I'm almost positive at this point that the chemicals in food especially, but really around us, are the driving factor, or at least one of them, for the increased risk. So where do we go from here? I mean, parents are, they don't know what to feed their kids.
It's a difficult decision to be in. It's a difficult place to be in as a parent. I think that as you mentioned, our bodies are designed to detoxify naturally. So, that's great. That's important. And you want to eat that healthy food and just kind of keep those, and, just to keep the body healthy and help support those natural detoxifying mechanisms also. But, I think, at least what I always recommend is, and I know this is hard with children, as I say this, I think of my own children, but the balanced diet I find is key, because that way you're not just depending on one source, one food. And I understand that with children, that's hard. I remember having a child who just wanted to eat sweet potatoes. And, now I realize sweet potatoes can be high in heavy metals. So, starting them young and trying to diversify their palate, I think is still important. I do think, one of the main things that have shocked people is that, organic food can also contain heavy metals, because I think a lot of us think, well, if it's organic, it's healthy. And it is. I wouldn't discourage you from eating organic. Because regardless of the heavy metals, the organic will at least eliminate a lot of the pesticides, which we know are not good for our children and their neural development. However, we're talking about two different things, and heavy metals can be found in organic food. So, I mean, I think that we just, as parents, we have to try to diversify, and we have these these like 4 or 5 companies that do produce food that has been tested. So at least we have that option when we have to buy store bought. And I think that's helpful too. And, I think that also I think knowledge is power in this case. I know it can be overwhelming. And it's like you say, yes, I've heard about this 10 times, 8 times in the last 10 years, but for that, it still doesn't make it okay, correct? Even though it's not new news, it's still wrong and things have to change. And what do parents do? So I do think that, knowledge is power in the sense that we as parents could then make calculated decisions, right? And we can feed our kids a more diverse palate. We can maybe not choose, especially for those like root grown vegetables that we know have higher levels of these chemicals. And I wouldn't worry about, once again, and I think you kind of, alluded to this, it's not that eating a week's worth or a month's worth or even 2 months worth of this food will necessarily damage your child for the rest of their life. It's generally, we think it's the cumulative effect. So I know with lead it's not like that, but our bodies it is still low levels. We're not talking about a huge amount. It's just the problem is that with children, they're more vulnerable. So you just want to decrease, especially with arsenic and heavy metals. But I guess what I'm saying is that I wouldn't freak out about what you've done until now. At this point, just move forward and kind of, make the educated decisions in terms of your children's food and diversify. I keep on saying it, but that's how important I think it is. I think that we need to not just feed them the same thing over and over again. And I think that's going to be key for everything, really, especially for food, though.
Yeah, and the reality is, yeah, it stinks, right? It's we don't want to be overstepping our bounds with talking about some of these things without all the information, but we do have enough information to know that a lot of our food is crappy. That just is how it is. And this isn't different for baby food or adult food. It maybe has more of an effect on a baby because that's all they're eating.
Right.
But it's reality of all of
exactly.
Our food. And when you say, what can you do? Well, you make different choices. You choose the companies that do provide extra testing and do look into these things. And, just like organic was not a thing 10, 20 years ago, or not really much of a thing. It is because now more people are buying it. And if enough people become outraged about this and say, well, you know what, I'm not buying your product unless you get the metals out of there, then that will force them to do that. But it's like a cat and mouse game because unless there's real regulations from the top that stop this stuff, then they just play the game and they get around. And just like you said, most people think, oh, I buy organic. Well, that means that it's good, right? It's great, but it's not true. Organic just means they didn't spray it with pesticides, but there's a lot of other places where they could ruin the food for you. So, just because they don't spray it with pesticides doesn't mean it wasn't grown, in sulfuric acid, right? That doesn't mean anything. You can
or silent tubing if it's processed. Yes, like
deadly mushroom, right? And it could be organic, but that doesn't make it okay. So there are a lot of other things, and it could be grown organic and then go into a plant and then be sprayed with chemicals, right? So it's like there's so many steps, and then the companies have all these ways around it of not labeling things, or they don't label things, or nobody's watching. There's so many things that can happen. So it gets really crazy.
There's a lot.
If you think about
that.
But just like you said, diversify, try to make the food whenever you can. Our bodies are really amazing at detoxifying. This isn't new. It's in all of our food to whatever degree. And not all of it is necessarily bad or really problematic. Your body can handle it for the most part. But do what you can do when you can do it, which is make your own food. And it's, yes, I'm a parent, right? I get it. I get that everybody's really busy, but this is like, alert, we need to wave the flag. We need to be making our own food. This has to be a priority for everybody. Yes. And you cannot use the excuse as much as possible that you're busy for food. We have to make our own food. That's just what it is. We're just getting to that point.
Yeah, you have to make the time. And I did get a lot of questions about, well, is it worth making your own food? Because you said, this is in the soil. But I want to reiterate that a lot of what they found was that a lot of the additives were adding to that level of heavy metals. And also, if you happen to be growing, if you have a garden at home and you happen to, be able to grow your own fruits and vegetables, you can actually have your soil tested for heavy metals. It's not that difficult. You can buy a kit online. So that's also worth, considering if you have the space to grow your own food and time. But organizing yourself, you can just, cook it on the weekends and then maybe freeze it. And that's fine. That's fine for kids. And yeah, I wanted to actually, because I also, going back to what you mentioned about, voting with your dollars, and it's amazing how much power we have. And that's, something that we should take seriously, because it can make a difference, and it has made a difference. So, when you look at those companies that, they sold the food knowing that they had high levels of certain heavy metals, don't continue buying them. Support the ones that are actually, even though there's no regulations in the US, they're going the extra mile and having their products tested to make sure that what they're testing is safe. And I think that that's something, and I'll read like the names of the companies that I know of, and maybe there's others, but I think it's worth mentioning. One is Tiny Human Food, the other one's Serenity Organics, Yummy Spoonfuls, Once Upon a Farm, and Fresh Bellies. Those are all Clean Label Project certified. And some of them are smaller, some of them are larger, but I think that, voting with your dollar can really make an impact here. And yeah, hopefully, I do think that the government has to step up, though. I do think that if these heavy metals are regulated in our drinking water, then they should be regulated in baby food. It just makes sense to me. Babies are vulnerable. They're little. They need that like extra protection. So hopefully now that, Congress has taken an interest, hopefully we'll see change coming also.
Yeah, and sometimes with these kind of articles, it does spur, more of a movement. It's a slow movement, but we do this stuff needs to be out of all of our food, not just baby food. It's crazy that we're not testing for this stuff. It's obviously not good for you. And again, this is the time where we have to start making our food a priority. And I get it, everybody's busy. I'm not saying you should never buy prepared food ever, but this is one thing that you should prioritize in your life. As if I can do one thing each day to make my kids a little bit healthier, I'm going to try to take that extra 20 minutes and make the food, 3 times a week instead of once a week, or 5 times a week instead of 3 times a week, and just try to increase that. And yes, there are still chemicals in the ground, but there's obviously this is not rocket science. There's obviously fewer chemicals in something you make or something that you get locally than something that's processed in it. And there's the chemical plus whatever crap they put in there, and whatever keeps it on the shelf for 2 weeks. I mean, that stuff isn't good for you. Obviously, you're supposed to eat it off the tree, right? You're supposed to eat it that day. So whatever keeps it around for another 2 weeks, okay, it's good because we need food for humans, but that you lose something by getting that extra preservation of the food. So it's just, we have to go back to thinking this way. Everybody needs to plant a garden. Everybody needs to help with local garden. We just have to do this moving forward. This has to come out of this, and we cannot be lazy, with this. We have to prioritize this for ourselves and our families, because this is the tip of the iceberg. It's probably a million times worse. They studied those, couple chemicals. There's probably a lot more in there. And if we fix those 4 chemicals, then they're going to put 4 other chemicals in. They're always one step ahead. They got a lot of money, so they will be ahead. So you need to do what you can to get your own food as much as you can within your budget. And it's cheaper to garden than to buy food. It's just more work, but it's important work.
It is. So. It is important work. I totally agree with you. And I think you very eloquently put it. It's true. It's worth the effort. It really is worth the effort. Our kids are worth the effort. And, once again, if you need to eat this, and if you're making your own food the majority of the time, if you're using, good ingredients, then if you need to buy a pre-made one once because you went out or you were on traveling or whatever, then it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. The problem is when it's the other way around, when you're relying on the store-bought stuff every single day, and it's a rarity that you're actually cooking the fresh food. That's where where the body becomes like overburdened with these.
Right. That's exactly what and that's true of all, if you never let your kid have cake, they're going to rebel and have cake every day. Right. So it's, once in a while, it's not the end of the world, but if you can, for the most of the time, make their food, then you know exactly what ingredients are in there. You're going to have as few chemicals as are possible, and you're going to give them the best chance. There's nothing but logic there, and we need to just start thinking that way and then do our best. I want to garden more. That's been my big thing this year, is I'm going to be working on, because I think that's just so important, and we need to do it. That's it. It's just, there's no other option. Sometimes something
Agree.
happens in the world, and this is one of those things that just pushes you to make that realization, and we will. So
Agree. Agree.
any other final thoughts you want to leave everybody with before we go?
No, just balance, balanced diet, balanced life. I think that's the key. I think, don't get overwhelmed, do something about it. If you see that you need to change, and it's okay. We can all change. It's never too late to change. So don't feel bad about it. Just move on and make those changes.
I appreciate it. That's beautiful words. Where can people find you if they want to learn more of your awesome work or learn more about
Um,
toxins?
Thank you. So I have my website, nontoxicmunchkin.com, and I'm very active on Instagram at nontoxicmunchkin. You can email me anywhere, Clubhouse, anywhere.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, especially on vacation, to chat about this. It's really important, and I really appreciate that you took time out of your day, even while away, to help a lot of families in need, and learn about this, because this is a big deal. I'm surprised how many people actually messaged me about this. So thank you so much.